This is PASTORALE, a collection of engravings by Lucian Pissarro, published in 2011 in a collaboration between the Whittington Press, the Ashmolean Museum of Oxford, and the Morgan Library in New York. Whittington were responsible for the printing of the book. The role of the Ashmolean is that upon Pissarro's death, they received the contents of his studio and were therefore able to put on an exhibition in 2011 about Pissarro's time in England, during which he founded the Whittington Press, which was one of the great private presses of the early British private press movement. And anybody interested in early private press publishing may well want to acquire a copy of this exhibition catalogue, which contains not only an interesting catalogue of Whittington publications here at the back of the book, but also numerous interesting essays about Pissarro's time in England and his establishment of that press. On to PASTORALE itself. It was published in an edition of 300 copies. Here I have one of the standard C copies, and it is presented in a slipcase. The binding is due to the fine book bindery, and this slipcase is very typical of their work for the Whittington Press. So it has these grey cloth ends, which is a nice embellishment, and then the sides are covered in paper, and that paper has this faint blue pinstripe pattern, which is a nice touch. It makes the paper a little bit more interesting than if it was just plain white. Removing the book from its slipcase, we see that it's quarter bound in this grey Fabriano paper over a blue Fabriano paper. On the front board here, we have the title is blind embossed in the front. That's quite a nice subtle touch. And we also have printed here the Whittington Press press mark. Over on the spine is a very simple title label just with the book's title. The top edge of the text block is trimmed. Of course, we have a sewn binding with these blue striped headbands, and the bottom and fore edges have been left untrimmed. So that's the exterior design of the book. We have these nice oatmeal coloured end papers with a nice, somewhat coarse texture that's quite tactile and pleasurable. And then we come to the main paper itself, and here there's a slightly interesting story to tell. We have at the beginning of the book this essay by John Bidwell about that paper and its history. Bachelors, a famous maker of fine papers in England at the time, had been producing paper to the specification of William Morris for use at his Kelmscott press. And the B state of this edition is published on some bachelor's flower paper that was an example of that paper produced to Morris's specification. The A edition is printed on otter paper, which is a special making of that paper for use in a particular printing project. I believe the difference between those two papers is only the watermark. And then finally, the C edition is printed on crown and sceptre paper, a paper that was produced by bachelors for use by other publishers. And the idea is that they would produce a sort of official licensed replica of the Kelmscott paper to prevent other publishers from using cheap knockoffs of that paper. The crown and sceptre was acquired by J.P. Morgan for use in a publishing project that he was intending to sponsor. But that publishing project never came off, and so a large quantity of that paper sat in the archives of the Morgan Library in New York for the best part of a century before that too was acquired by the Whittington Press to be used in the C copies of this edition. And that explains why the Morgan Library is also a joint publisher of this edition. We also received with the edition this slip of paper in which the press apologises for the fact that this paper is antique and that may therefore contain some age-related marks. Returning to the front of the book, we first have the title spread. On the recto leaf here is a classic Whittington Press title page, classic in its austerity, printed in two colours, green and black. Perhaps more interesting, more exciting here, over on the verso page, is the first of Lucian Pissarro's engravings. Like three other engravings in this edition, this one is in colour. The colour proofing was handled by Miriam McGregor, and we also see just below that there's a numeral line debossed, and that will help us in a moment when we see an index of the engravings in this edition. Besides that essay by John Bidwell, there's a small amount of other textual material at the start of the volume. So we have this one-page introduction by John Randall about the genesis of the edition. Here's that essay by John Bidwell. Next is a short 2-page essay by Miriam McGregor, who, besides proofing those colour engravings, had a grandfather who was a personal acquaintance of Lucian Pissarro, so there are some interesting recollections to be found there. And then we have an index of the engravings that are included in this edition, and they're numbered to correspond to those blind debossed numerals that I talked about. It's very useful to have this so we can see not only what engraving are we looking at, but which Whittington Press edition does it come from. And then some of the engravings also have these notes by Colin Harrison, which again are quite helpful. There are 24 engravings in total, and as I said, 4 of those are in colour. So now we'll go through and take a look at the engravings. I won't say too much other than to comment that I think there's something a little bit medieval about Pissarro's style. All of the engravings have in common that they reflect some sort of pastoral scene, pastoral life, hence the name of the edition. And I think they're very interesting images that are quite nicely collected together in this edition. So now let me be quiet for a moment and we'll take a look at those engravings. All of the engravings, as you can see, are printed only on the recto leaves, so we have no problems of show-through or any other interference in the pleasure of looking at the engravings themselves. Coloration in some of these engravings is also quite superb, and here's an example of a leaf which has that crown and sceptre watermark. And we finish up here again with that Whittington Press mark. As usual, we have a colophon at the end of the edition. It's hand numbered and contains production details for the 3 states of this edition, and some last delightful sheets of that antique bachelor's paper. So that is Pastorale, primarily by the Whittington Press. There's not a lot of textual content in this edition, but it's a real pleasure to be able to take this down from the bookcase occasionally and leaf through enjoying those engravings. And it doesn't hurt that it's printed on that delicious antique paper, which makes it quite a tactile and sensual delight too. So another nice edition from the Whittington Press.